Welcome to this episode of Pen to Paper Press Podcast. I'm Cindy Coaches. There is a backstory weaved into each book. To explore the creative process, I'm sitting down with authors, writers, editors, publishers, and an array of creative souls to have a conversation centered on how they develop their stories to completing their works of art. Each episode is an opportunity for us to explore mindsets, pearls of wisdom, and the experiences that began our journey as an author from the moment we put pen to paper. Carrie Knowles is an award-winning artist, an author with a passport the size of a library, and is passionate about guiding and teaching writers on their creative path. She has published both nonfiction and fiction books, and she was named the North Carolina Piedmont Laureate for short fiction in 2014. The titles to her books include Lillian's Garden, The Inevitable Past, A Musical Affair, and she transformed a collection of short stories into Black Tie Optional. Her memoir is The Last Childhood, A Family Story of Alzheimer's. And Carrie's Writing Workbook is a self-guided workbook and gentle tour on learning how to write short stories from start to finish. Her latest book, Shifting Forward, is a collection of essays from her column in Psychology Today. Welcome to the Pen to Paper Press virtual studio, Carrie. It is so great to have you here.
Thank you. And it's so much fun in these virtual studios that I sort of always fit no matter what,
Yes. And we don't have, if we have a bad hair day, it's perfectly fine.
And there are perfectly bad hair days. Yeah.
Yeah. And we don't have to, truly, we don't have to throw on the mascara or the lipstick or any gussying up. We can just come as we are. So.
Right.
And, quite honestly, it was fun to, write out your introduction. And I left a lot out, by the way. And
there are a couple books that fell by the wayside, but, we'll get to those.
We will, because, I really wanted to talk to you versus describe you, because like you said, eventually we'll get to those different aspects further into the conversation. But what I would love to learn about is the free range studio. How did that come into fruition?
I can tell you exactly how that came into fruition. I had for many years, we had 3 children. And for many years, I kept an office at home. After I got married, I didn't get married until my 30s. And so I had an office, very nice office in both the homes we have at different times. And I had carted from Chicago to Raleigh, North Carolina, to wherever we were, the same bricks and boards that I had made bookcases of when I was in college. And it was like, that worked, that people used to do that. We used to get cinder blocks and 1x12 boards and make, bookcases. Very important. This was long before IKEA got the idea that, we gave them, I'm sure we should have, patented that. But I was, periodically, I'm asked to lecture at various places, and I don't even know where it was. And it was like a weekend kind of workshop thing. And I was talking about, questions came up about, working styles and where people work and what's important. And I got up there in my bold self and said, it's so important to have a place that you recognize as your space to work in. Mm-hmm. And that's the only thing you do when you're there. You write. That's it. You don't do anything else. You don't fold laundry. You don't do anything else. And I came home from that workshop, and I was very, like I said, I was very bold in my presentation and said, this is so important if you really want to be professional about what you're doing, to have a professional space. And I came home and I looked at my little office and I looked at my bricks and my boards, and I went, put your money where your mouth is. And I said to my husband, I came down for dinner and I said, I'm going to go buy a building. And he said, you're going to do what? And I said, I'm going to buy a building. And he said, okay. And I started looking and I found a building on the edge of a historic district in Raleigh. And it had originally been law offices.
Okay.
And then briefly in the 60s, early 60s, it had been a home. And then it reverted back to becoming a law offices. In fact, I bought it from a lawyer who had his office there. And that became the Free Range Studio. And I am also a visual artist. And I took, once again, a bold move. I took two of the offices, and I broke down the wall in between them and made, one of them was my studio and the other one was my writing office. And then I had another office downstairs that I rented to Peggy Payne, another wonderful writer. And then the upstairs, there were two offices upstairs. And periodically, there would be other artists and writers in residence there, or, we actually had, it was the way it was zoned. I could let somebody live up there, if they were in Raleigh and needed a place and they were here and they needed an actual residence.
Mm-hmm.
And then a number of writers used the upstairs, and various tenants over the 17 years that I owned the building. I actually just sold the building. Times change, things grow. Right. And the Free Range Studio was a place that I was very proud of, and lots of great work came out of that. And there was a lot of support for other writers and artists to do interesting work there. So that was the Free Range Studio, and where dreams should have no fences, and creativity, no boundaries. That was our slogan. And the time came for us to leave Raleigh recently, and we decided to do that. And I sold my office building actually to a good friend of mine who's a violin maker. And so now it's going to become a violin artisan shop, which is really quite wonderful, that it has a
that
new
is.
Yeah. And so we have a home that we've had for a while in Oberlin, Ohio, and I have an office here, and I also have a 2-car garage. You have to understand, in the South, nobody has a garage, and this little home that we bought has an attached 2-car garage. I thought I was the queen of the world. I thought, oh my God, I told everybody. They said, what is your little house? I said, oh, it's little, but I have a 2-car garage. So I had somebody come in and insulate it really well, and had an electrician come and put great lighting in it. And I had a guy build some studio pieces for me that are on wheels. So I back the car out, wheel them out, and, I've got a workspace. And we just recently, in fact, this weekend, bought a place also in Washington, D.C. So I'm going to live the best life ever. I have a home between 2 cornfields in Oberlin, Ohio. And Oberlin is a tiny, tiny, wonderful college town. And then I'll have a home in Hill East and Capitol Hill area in downtown DC, and be with all that culture. And I'm hoping some good ideas will come from it. And I feel quite lucky to be able to be in this position now. But, what helped was to sell an office building and also to sell a home in Raleigh. So there you are. There you have it. And
interesting.
And I do think that it's so important for everyone, particularly women, because we have a tendency to, I think the hardest thing about a woman working at home is to step over the laundry. There ought to be like an exercise that you do that, how like those balance exercises where you have to like move from foot to foot. There ought to be like a whole regime. Maybe I'll write about this. There has to be a whole regime where you have to learn to walk through the laundry, like just literally step over the laundry going to your office. And you turn off all the other phones, and you that's it. And you have a space. One of the nice things, many years ago, I had the privilege, I was a scholarship winner for Bread Loaf Writers Conference. And too long of a story, but it was the waiter scholarship, which was always seen as like the holy of holies. And we wore white dinner jackets, and we sort of did the whole thing. And we got in trouble, the waiters did, because we had a renegade reading of our work, which was seen as very bad form, that only the big names could do that. And but then they realized if they kicked us out, they threatened to kick us out for doing that. If they kicked us out, there would be nobody to serve dinner. So it's like, can't kick these people out, And this was, it was a very funny thing. This is 1971. And anyway, Isaac Asimov was there, which was such a privilege to meet him. And he got wind of what had happened. And we were, resoundingly told, we shouldn't be doing that. We had to get in our place and wait our turn and whatever. And he went to the director and said, look, I want to give these people a gift. And they were like, you don't exactly say no to Isaac Asimov. And so he gave us, the waiters who had gotten into trouble, he gave us an evening with just him, and nobody else could attend. And so we spent an entire evening with Isaac Asimov. And he told us many wonderful things. At that point, I think he had 27 books in print. He was really brilliant. He was very funny, very relaxed, very funny. And he said, in the course of the evening, he said, if anybody tells you that they write more than 4 hours a day, he said, they're lying. They're lying. You can't do it for more than 4 hours a day. And I thought that was such a great thing to know, that there's many other things now that a writer has to do, like the podcasts and the, Facebook and, all of those things.
Mm-hmm.
Do so much. Plus, you have to do a certain amount, no matter who publishes you have to do a certain amount of legwork in terms of, making connections and tweeting, and, who would ever know that we would be saying things like, do you tweet?
Yeah, right.
What is your tweet handle? And are you kidding me? Do you know how old I am? I don't do that. Anyway, I do that now, and, but to actually sit down and work, that's 4 hours of hard work. If you can do that, you can do anything. You can really do well. If you write 2 pages a day, 2 keepers, not just blah, but 2 pages that by the end of the 4 hours, you are willing to say, these are mine. I am proud of these. I'm going to keep these. If you do that 5 days a week, if you take off all the legal holidays and you take off a week for your birthday and you take a 2-week vacation somewhere and you take an extra week and a half or 2 weeks just in case you get a cold, if you do that in a year's time, you'll have basically a book done by the end of the year.
Yes.
Do that. There are a lot of interruptions in life, but I think the first step is stepping over the laundry. The first step is getting to that room that's your room where you can work in, and you identify that. The other thing, which is cell phones, and you can stop me anytime, because once I get going,
I know. Hey, I'm good with all of this. And cell phones, you're right. That is probably my biggest distraction. Right. It's not Facebook. It's my cell phone.
It's your cell phone. And so we have kids who live all over the world. So my excuse is I need to know if everybody's okay.
Yes, that is so very important.
Right. But the other thing is so important, that you treat sitting down and writing, when you sit down and your computer is open, that computer is you and that computer have made a sacred space. Yes. And you are not to surf the internet. You are not to find, that perfect pair of shoes, or I need some new hangers, or, I wonder if Amazon would deliver, or let me check my Amazon number. Don't ever check your Amazon numbers. I wanted to choke myself yesterday when I did that. But, it, so you just don't do those things. You have to kind of step over the laundry. And the next thing you have to do is when you sit down in that chair, that is writing time. That's not surfing time.
Right.
And the other thing, the rule that I made for myself, which worked really, really well, is if I took a phone call, I stood up and turned my back to my computer and took the phone call away from my computer.
That's an interesting idea, because what it does is it helps to separate what you're doing and diverts your attention, one, to the call, to who you're talking to,
right.
But also when you get back to it, you're engaging that focus back on. That's brilliant. I like that. I'm going to have to remember that.
Very conscious. It's very, very conscious. And, you just know if you're going to pick up that phone and make a phone call because your husband said, oh, could you book blah, 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 or whatever. The answer is, okay, fine, I'll do that. But you don't do it sitting at your desk. That is, you establish a sacred space for yourself to work into the story. And it works. I mean, it helps. But the first step, like I said, is stepping over the laundry. If you're going to work at home, it's stepping over the laundry.
Yes. And there's a whole bunch of people out there going, can I do that? Yeah, you can.
I mean, you kind of say, well, let me look at my drawer and see if I've got enough underwear to not do laundry today.
Yeah, right.
Whatever. But it's so important. I mean, and that's because we are easily distracted. I don't know about you,
yes.
But I'm like, I'm very easily distracted. We're all very easily distracted. Yes. And so let's start chipping away at what distracts us and set some new parameters for ourselves and say, I've just started an article today, with my Psych Today column, which is a lot of fun. But anyway, I was reminded, by everything that's going on in the, let's not talk about all of that stuff.
Yeah, we're not going there.
No. But I was reminded, I had this idea about, because I do talk about writing a lot on podcasts and to other people, and when I go lecture, whatever. And so the whole issue of what is a vocation, what is an avocation, and what is a hobby. First, let me say, when I bought the building, when I bought the free range studio, mm-hmm. people they were just shocked. Now, these are people who knew me, but if you're a writer, you really don't have that many people you can talk about your writing to, because
right.
99.9% of the world doesn't understand, including your mother, doesn't understand why you're still working on that book. Why are you still working on that book, or have we moved to another book? What's going on here? So there are very few people that, Peggy Payne is like, I can talk, Peggy and I can talk about all that stuff. I have very few people that I can talk about that stuff with. But anyway, when I bought the building, people were like, well, what are you doing? And I said, what do you mean? I bought a building. I own a building. I own a little office building. It's very cute. You're going to like it. And they said, well, excuse me, but how often do you go to that building? I mean, you bought a building. How often do you go to work at that? And I said, really? I said, I've been doing this professionally since I was in my very early 20s, and actually 19. And I said, this is my job. And I said, how often do you go to your office? And they said, well, I have a job. And I said, well, so do I. This is my job. And I said, I'm a 9-to-5-er, Monday through Friday. I do this just like you. I get dressed up and I get in my car and I drive to my office and I park in my little parking space and I walk in and I bing my computer and I'm at work. Don't call me to pick up your kid because I'm at work. So I always dressed up to go to work, even when it was in my home. And people were always shocked by that. I mean, they were terribly shocked by that. And then a couple of years ago, after my husband retired, he kind of said, are you going to retire? And I said, oh, yeah, well, there's no HR department for me. So complicated, it's very complicated. Plus I have this publisher and it's a very complicated issue. So I decided I was going to try sort of an early, sort of a little bit of a retirement. I was going to do something that would be retirement like, and or retirement light, I should say, and kind of treat it like an opening of a new restaurant or something. So I decided, well, I'm the one who decided to go in at 9 to 5. So what if I started taking a water exercise class every morning? And then I don't get to the office until 10. That seemed to me to be like a super reasonable adult decision for how I was going to deal with the fact that, maybe one of these days I should retire. So I did that. And I love the swim classes. I still do them. I love them, love them, love them. And because you can't hurt yourself in the water. And I don't understand my friends who say, well, I don't get wet. And I say, do you take a shower? I don't get that.
Good point.
Right, exactly. So I started going to the pool and doing my little pool thing. And then I would shower and get dressed and put on my makeup, and off I'd go to my office, and I would arrive 10:15, sometimes 10:20. And there weren't enough hours in the day for me to get everything I needed to get done in order to stay afloat as a writer. So all of a sudden, instead of working from 9 to 5, I was working from 10 to 6. Okay. So I didn't do anything, I didn't kind of step back from my work at all. But anyway, it's complicated. There's no HR department,
And, sometimes we have the most generous boss. Sometimes we have the cruelest boss and the most shaming.
Oh, I've got that one. That's mine. The cruel, shaming one that's my boss. I don't have the gentle one. I don't, I almost have to ask permission. I could be like, I really need a new pair of shoes and I can't do it over the weekend. Would you mind if I just took maybe an hour off and went there? No, I have the cruel boss.
Unless it involves my grandkids, then it's like, grandma overrules the boss.
Right. Well, I mean,
it's okay. Bye.
I mean, that's the reason that we're in Oberlin, Ohio, and the reason why we just bought a place in downtown, on Capitol Hill, is because we have grandchildren in Oberlin and we have grandchildren in DC, and we actually have 2 lovely, beautiful, wonderful grandchildren in Brussels. Our oldest son lives in Belgium, and which we haven't been able to go to because of COVID. Right. And so now we're better situated for a really good, plane connection. And so we hope that, this is all going to somehow work out. Yeah. So the grandma thing is, that's a whole nother podcast. We could come back about, the grandma podcast. It's very different, it is. And my grandchildren, our grandchildren are, don't quite grasp the idea that Gaga works, and what does she do? Is that work? It sounds like my mother. They're channeling my mother. I remember my mother, and let me just say, I did a lot of commercial work to keep me afloat, which I can talk about that too. The balance between commercial work and creative work. I mean, there's creative commercial work, but you got to make money, and it's, books are not the way to make money, but you do those other things. And I remember my mother saying one time, just in such distress, and I've been I have been self-employed for years, and I've always paid my bills and whatever. And my mother would say, oh, I just every day I think, you're going to call me and tell me you got a real job. And I said, Mom, I have a real job. She said, no, that's not what you do. Isn't a real job. And I hear the same thing my grandchildren saying, is that a job? And I said, yes, it's a job. It is a job, Anyway, back to the boyfriend. Let me tell you that story. So, I'm doing this article about, I'm writing an article about, vocation, avocation, and hobby. And I remembered that many years ago, in my early 20s, a young man, not so young, a man wanted to marry me. And in the proposal to marry me, he was stupid. Let me just say that right up front. And he said, and I quote, "And I just want you to know, I think it's wonderful that you like to write because I think it's very important for a woman to have a hobby."
Ooh.
Oh,
Ooh,
so let me just say, I got up from that dinner, walked out the door, and never looked back, you know?
I'd be gone too. I'd be like, no.
Yeah, do you really want to would you like to edit that? You know?
Oh, I wouldn't have given him a chance. I'm a little harder.
You know, it's not a hobby. And I tell people, young people say, I want to be a writer. And my first question is, have you ever handed a paper in late at school? And they look at me like, well, yeah. And I say, well, then do something else, because there's no late papers in professional work. There's no missed deadlines. That you don't do that, or you don't get paid. Simple.
Right.
You don't get paid.
Correct. And there are people who function better when they have those deadlines.
Yeah.
But here's the key element: who's determining that deadline? If I set a deadline for myself, I can push it off. I don't always hold that same rigid, this is the due date, when it's myself that creates that deadline. But if you were to say, you know what, Cindy, I need you to write blah, 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 and I need it by May 31st.
Yeah.
I might procrastinate for the first week and say that I'm mulling it over in my head, but you will have it. And it will be good on May 31st. I may have stayed up all night, but you will have it.
No, I mean, it's like deadline. The reason that, I said, why do you think the word dead is in that, deadline? It's not like final line. It's not like winning line. It's deadline,
Yeah, winning line. Right. Winning line. I'm at the winning line.
Right. I crossed the finish line. Yay. Deadline. If you don't make it,
Oh my gosh. Oh, so true. So true. I had not really put that, twist on the word. I will now. Oh, I will now.
No, true. But it's so, the college students just look at me like, yeah, of course, I said, down to the wire. No. We don't do that, And the computer has made that whole deadline thing way different than it was 50 years ago.
Yes.
Way different. And, I don't particularly like it, because it used to be you would do something and then you would pop it in the mail, and 3 days later the editor would get it, and then they would call you and say, we're thinking maybe run a sidebar about this, and can you do that? Give us another 250, 300 words on that. And I say, oh, sure. And then I would write those, and then I would send them in, and they would say, oh, that's really nice. Let's make that bigger. And I go, okay, sure. And so you had this breathing space, you had this time to kind of consider the whole of what you were doing. And you would have time, they would have time to think, you would have time to think, you would have deadlines that would come, that, okay, I need this by, okay, now we want more, and we're going to make another deadline. And everybody had time to think. And now it's like, you do something and you touch that little button and bam, it's off. And somebody calls you and says, or doesn't even call you, sends you a text and says, okay, we need another 300 words by 4. And you're like, well, this isn't as much fun as I used to have. It's different.
Yeah.
Very different.
And I remember, oh my gosh, years and years ago, periodically I would do interviews in the area that I live for a newspaper columnist, and she would do local stuff, but every once in a while stuff would be happening here. And it was great. I loved working with her through email. And as you were talking about that, it was like, oh my gosh, I remember that with Kathy. She'd be what about this? And I need it by Friday. Can you do it? And I'd be like, yeah,
Yeah.
of
Yeah.
course. How do I get a hold of this person? And I get a phone number, and at that point, it was, you met the person in person.
Right.
You didn't do interviews like this, most certainly not over the internet, because at that point the internet was not something that was accessible to us.
Right. Right.
Not like this anyways. You didn't have the video conference calls. I don't even think at that point you could really do phone calls. Skype wasn't a thing at that point. Email, you could email.
There was, before Skype, there was something else. I don't remember what it was, but
MySpace, was it MySpace?
it was hard, and
I don't remember.
And then it was all this technology and stuff, which some of us excel at and others of us don't.
I do. I somehow I have a natural gift of figuring the stuff out, and that's where that's where I become the teacher, and I end up showing others how to do XYZ. Well, what do you mean? I can't find that email. Well, do you have it stuff sorted in folders? And it's like, folders? I can do folders? What do you mean? There's a filing cabinet in my computer or in my email? And it's like, can we meet? I'll show you.
You would okay. You would sort of you would probably send me to the corner and make me sit and think hard about what I'm doing and why my computer's such a mess. And
oh, not at all. Not at all. A dear friend of mine, and she's old enough to be my mother, but yet her and I are sisters on many, many levels. And she worked in an office, and she was the oldest one in the office. And she didn't understand email. She knew how to do it. She knew how to send and receive, open attachments. She understood all of that, but she didn't understand how to use it. And some of the gals in the office would shame her. Well, what do you mean you can't find? And they berated her. And so because at that point I was in newspaper sales, and I was in her office, and she's like, I can't find this, and I'm really so sorry, I'm taking up your time. And I'm like, you're fine, don't worry about it. And she's like, I just wish I knew how to do. I'm like, well, I can show you how to do that. That's no problem. She's like, would you? And then she closed the office door, and she's like, they won't help me. And I'm like, what do you mean they won't help you? She's like, they won't. They just tell me I'm whatever, and basically shamed her. And so she couldn't ask for help because of that.
Right. Yeah.
And so I'm like, how about we meet after hours, and I will show you. And so I would meet her at the office at like 8:00 at night, how to use her email, how to function through different other programs that she was struggling with, because she had been shamed so bad that she could not ask for help. And to me, that's cruel. How do you do that to somebody? How do you not help?
And it's and if you go to a computer repair shop, and they start doing that thing and saying, oh, this is so old, and you go, this is not old, it's 2 years old, this is not old, don't give me that, I need a new machine, just fix this machine for me, thank you very much. No, it's hard. And so I think you have to learn to be shameless and flexible and willing to say, okay, I don't know how to do this, so
yes.
So either we're going to find another way for us to have a conversation, or we're not going to have a conversation because this machine won't do that, or whatever. And I was just informed that my iPhone 6 is going to be made
obsolete.
Obsolete. Yeah, there you go. And I keep saying to my husband, I need to go. Oh, I need to go. This is his little computer. I'll be right back. I'm going to give him, because his phone is hooked to his computer and it keeps ringing. the technical problem. I'm in my husband's office and he left his iPad, and every time his phone rings, his iPad rings. So there you go.
I love it. But you want to know what's really funny? We have been talking for quite a while, and we have yet to talk about your books.
My book. That's why I'm here.
So it's quite obvious you and I could spend hours and hours talking, and and truly everything that we've shared, I mean, my audience is going to resonate with, because they're going to be giggling right along with us, and they're going to be like, oh yeah, I recognize that, or yeah, I get that.
The laundry thing, yeah. No, my books. Yeah, I was the Piedmont laureate in 2014 for short fiction. And that was really interesting. I did 42 workshops in 10 months.
Wow, that's crazy.
It was crazy. I put 3,000 miles on my car and covered 5 counties in North Carolina. And, because it was sponsored by the arts councils in these, 5 counties, it was free, and so it was very interesting because it was, people could take these classes, these workshops at no expense. And they didn't even, they, out of courtesy, had to register because we needed to know how many people, how big the room had to be, whatever, where I was going to be. And so people could take these people who were thinking about, maybe they wanted to be a writer or they wanted to write something. They could do it without having to tell anyone that they were taking a workshop and that they were, blah, 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 blah. And so it was very convenient. So I had a wide range of people who, I had people who were doctors and lawyers and this and that. And I had housewives, the doctors and lawyers and engineers had gone to college and graduate school and professional school and whatever, but they hadn't taken any literature classes or any creative writing classes, but they wanted to move their professional work into a more creative venue, a more public venue. Mm-hmm. And then I had housewives, and I had teenagers, and I had elderly people. But 99% of them had never had literature classes. So where I had taught before, I was able to say, well, okay, in Madame Bovary, blah, 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 we see this, and, we can model after that, or, Tom Sawyer, even something as simple as that. We could talk literature in terms of style and writing style and how to handle dialogue and all these things. Well, all of a sudden I had an audience who didn't read those things, that was a foreign language to them. So I had to create, and I had lectured for years up to that point. So I had to create a new way to talk about writing and how to write. And that became the Writing Workbook. And it is set up with simple lessons and in really down-to-earth language. And instead of books, I use movies. That popular movies that people have seen to talk mm-hmm. about character development and plot development and all of those issues. And I had to come up with exercises for them to do that were not academic, that were doable, that there was something that they would relate to. So you have these little lessons that are 4 to 5 pages long. Then you have questions. And if you did those questions, and then you had prompts. So you could take what you learned from that and mm-hmm. prompt, and then you could write a brief thing for yourself in the workbook. If you did all of that throughout the whole book, if you worked the workbook, which it is a workbook, mm-hmm. filled out all that stuff, by the end of it, you would have the foundation for a book for yourself to begin to write a book. And you would understand how to do dialogue, and you would understand, how to do all of that stuff in a very painless way. So I took all the lessons that I developed for those 40 workshops and turned it into a workbook, basically. that anybody could follow. And so that's what it is. And it's kind of geared towards, I don't want to say that it's, I mean, anybody with a high school education is going to be able to understand everything in that book.
Right.
It's not written in a,
foreign language that's
exactly.
it's not like going to the doctor's office where they're talking Latin and you're like going, huh?
Denouement and all of that stuff. And, no, it's just simple. And so it's like an easy workbook. It could be used in high school classes. It could be used in junior college. It could be used by an individual. But it is a gentle walk through writing is what it really is.
And I love the cover. All of your books have the covers of all your books are very stand alone, meaning you're not following a certain theme, and each one represents what the book is. And when I came across that cover, I was like, I love it.
Right. And, so people, because it has a long title, and that, that you sort of pick your battles with your publisher. And I had a different title. And then my publisher and the Kathy, who does the covers, has been doing, I think, the last 5 books. She's done the covers for my last 5 books. And she just said, no, this needs to be the title. I can never remember the whole title. So I tell people, if you want to get it, just go to All Canyon and you can get it there. Or you can call your bookstore. Just say Writing Workbook Knowles, and they'll know what it is, and they'll find it, and they'll be able to get it for you, But anyway, and we went round and round with my publisher. We purposely decided not to do it as an ebook, because there's wonderful research out there about retention, and that if you take physical notes with a pencil and a pen and a piece of paper, if you take notes that way, any writing you do that way, it's kinetic, and you retain the information better, and then taking notes than filling out things with your computer.
Right.
When you do the computer stuff, it's like, once it's done, it's flushed, it's out of there. So we purposely did it. So it's a workbook. You have to get the workbook. You can't do it you can't do it online.
Right. And I appreciate that, because of the fact that, well, for one, I don't enjoy reading ebooks. To me, I turn off the computer. It's another file that I've closed, and chances are of me opening it are minimal. Now, if I've got a physical book, it's sitting on my table, it's sitting on my nightstand, it's sitting in the bathroom somewhere. It's a reminder that, oh, hey, yeah, I got that thing over there. Oh, yeah, I want to read that. And, there is something about touching a book, the smell of the book, flipping the actual pages, feeling that, and hearing it's something about that whole process. And for me, if I'm to retain it has to be a physical action for me.
Right.
Such as writing out those answers, thinking, just thinking it in my head. And, I've attended many like online school course things or master classes or whatever, and everything's digital. Well, I'm not going to print it out because, oh my God, the price of ink cartridges is out of this world. I'm not going to spend, 2 ink cartridges to print out a book. And if I write it out in a notebook without that, when I go back to the notebook, it's like, where was that from?
Right.
It's unrecognizable. And for me, a workbook needs to be physical.
Yeah. And that's what it is. Yeah. So that's a fun book. Let's see. Do you want to know about the other books?
Oh, please. Yes.
The book that's coming out. In fact, it's out this week.
That's nice.
Yeah, it is nice. It's called Shifting Forward. I was approached by Psychology Today about 4 years ago. I'm not a psychologist. The editor said, I happen to see some of your writing. I really love the way you write. And we would like you to write in our personal perspectives column. And basically said, needs a somewhat psychological bent. I said, well, I'm not a psychologist. And they said, yeah, but you often write about things that sort of lean in that direction, which is true. And so I write about all kinds of things, from cats to COVID to gray hair to, you name it. And so it's the first 50 columns from my Psych Today column, which is called Shifting Forward. And so I'm really pleased. My publisher is just so delighted about this. He came to me and he said, we love your column. We love your column. Please, can we have, and I said, well, how about when I get to 50, we'll do 50. And he said, 50, fine, 50 is great. Get to 50 and we'll do 50. So that's coming out. I have a novel that came out last year. Was it last year or the year before? COVID has us all confused about the calendar.
Oh my gosh, doesn't it? It's like we lost 2 years, but when we were in those 2 years, it seemed to be this relentless, endless period of,
never going to end, and it may not ever end. I mean, so I wrote, kind of a fun romp. I have a very wonderful publisher, literary press publisher, who kind of, most publishers want you to repeat, oh, you're this kind of writer. We want you to do that kind of book again and again and again.
Yes. Yeah. Pigeonhole you
Obviously,
right into that.
You look at my books and you say, there's no trend here,
Right.
So I have a novel called A Musical Affair, which is based on my older son and I, several years ago, did an international music festival together. We ran an international music festival together for 5 years.
Wow.
And we brought musicians in from all over Europe, young upcoming stars in the music world. And it was great. But he called me and said, Mom, what do you think about this? I got this idea. Would you be willing to help me do this? And so of course I said, yes. I mean, how many times do you have a chance to work with one of your kids on that sort of level? I had no idea what I was doing. So this book is a novel, and it's, it's kind of a peek behind the curtain as to what it takes to do something like this. It's all about the arts, and it's really all about the money in arts. And it's fun. It's very fun. And my daughter-in-law's grandfather he would read all my books, and he would call me up and he'd say, sex, more sex. There's not enough sex in your book. So when I wrote A Musical Affair, I called Jerry up and I said, okay, so now you got some sex in a book. I hope you like it.
Enjoy.
And then the novel before that, so it took a hard left. It was, I guess the Musical Affair was a hard left. It was a book that I didn't really want to write. You will probably ask me at some point, where do you get your ideas? I mean, where does all this come from? As I mentioned before, I'm also a visual artist, and I'd done some work in Australia, and I got invited to be part of, along with 6 other international artists, I was invited to be in a special exhibition in Brisbane. And we were all what is referred to as dual artists, where we had 2 kind of media, my writing and visual art. Anyway, long story short, the curator of the show called me. And of course, when you get invited to do that, be in a show like that, they always want something fresh, something you've never done before. They want this to be like a new you, which is fine. And the name of the show was The Inevitable Past. And that became the name of this book. And anyway, Trevor called me and said, okay, we've done this. And we had, you usually get 18 months to 2 years to sort of develop the artwork for that particular kind of show. And I was, trying some things, and, nothing was going very well, but, the clock was ticking, but it wasn't ticking that loud. And Trevor called me and he said, we've done the schematic for the gallery and you're going to have a 30-foot wall. And I said, a what? And he said, would you like more? And I said, no, actually, see, because I'm going to bring all my artwork with me, that I'm over. He said, you can do it, 30 foot. So anyway, here's the story I never wanted to write. And because I didn't really know any more than what I'm now going to tell you. And that is in 1902, a young woman was found badly beaten on the train station in Macon, Georgia. She was very pregnant. She was unconscious. She didn't have a purse. She didn't have any ID. She didn't have a train ticket. She didn't have a piece of luggage. She didn't have a wedding ring or a mark on her hand where a wedding ring would have been. And she was very pregnant. And the police picked her up and took her to a place called the Door of Hope, which was a home for unwed mothers. And the doctor examined her and realized that she was pretty far along with her pregnancy. But more important than that was that she was not going to make it. She was going to die. And they made the decision to do an emergency C-section and take the baby. And the baby was my father.
Wow.
And the body was never claimed, and he never found out who his mother was. And the matron of the Door of Hope at that time was a widow by the name of Mrs. Knowles. And she decided, my father, because of it was an instrument birth, his eyes were damaged and he was blinded. And she decided, of course, it was, in the South, it was Georgia, turn of the century. And she just, it mattered who your daddy was. It mattered who your mother was. Mm-hmm. And she realized that this child was probably not going to be adoptable because he was handicapped. And also because he, had no lineage, no anything. And so she raised him herself and gave him her last name. And that's why my last name is Knowles, is because of Mrs. Knowles, Susan Knowles. And so that's all I had. And then, I wrote the first page of the book. And then I realized that the mother, the woman, was speaking from the grave. And because I've studied literature, I knew that, when Penelope was, doing the tapestry and unwinding it every night, so that the suitors wouldn't bother her, what that tapestry was at that time, if you, the daughter-in-law's responsibility by law was to create the shroud for their in-laws. And so what she was doing was weaving the shroud for Laertes. And that's why nobody could bother her, because she was doing her sacred duty. And that's why, because it's, people are like, well, so what that she's working on this tapestry? So why did these guys step aside? And they stepped aside because it was the law. She had to finish that tapestry. And so she would unweave it every night. So all of a sudden I realized I had the first page of this book, and I realized that the woman was speaking from the grave. And so I created a 27-foot fabric piece, and I embroidered. Now let me just point out, I didn't know how to embroider. And I embroidered freehand on antique linen handkerchiefs and cut them out like leaves, like, when the DNA makes that little leaf looking pointy thing. And so this 27-foot, I did a lot of research about what was a shroud, how big it is, the weight of the linen. And I made, as accurately as I could, something that would work as a shroud. And a good friend of mine, Kim Kirstein, helped me. She was a fabric dyer. She helped me dye the fabric. And then I embroidered all the words, every word from the first page of that book, onto these pieces of handkerchief, and they became like leaves and part of the DNA blowing through this piece. And so
Wow.
that became the beginning of this book. And it's about the grandmother and the granddaughter, and the grandmother needing something from the granddaughter. And so the book is written in 2 parts. So that's 180 degrees away from a romp about raising music for a music festival as you can possibly.
It's a whole different journey. Yes,
It is totally. So ideas come from all kinds of places.
they do.
I know that we're running out of time, but would you like me to read that first page?
I would love that.
Okay, let me go get it. They're right over here. Don't go away.
Yeah, nope. I'm right here.
And then and then there's a collection of short stories, which I really love. Black tie optional, whatever. I like them all for different reasons, but they're all very different. So this is the first page of the book. And this is, I wrote the first page and it's stayed. I am the grandmother you never knew, the one who vanished, the unsolved crime. I never held your father in my arms, only in my heart, but I was with him every step of his life, as I am with you. I am your blue eyes and your fair skin, a flutter, a thought, a whisper. I use dreams to guide you over the rough spots my life has created for you. My dreams are your dreams. I am part of you. What happened to me the night your father was born has shaped your life. I rest deep in your DNA. I cannot change that. I wish I could. My experiences have made you slow to trust. Shadows make your heart race. I know. But the good of me is in you as well. You are strong because I was strong. You fight back. You speak your mind. You have courage and are curious. You are smart like your father. You are the best of me. It is time for you to know who I was and who you are because of all that happened and why I have come to you. I need your help.
That's beautiful. That is beautiful.
So that's the inevitable past. Yeah. So there are 9 books. So we would have another hour to talk about the other.
So, from what I gathered at the beginning of our conversation is that you have this routine of writing, and that is your process. And through other aspects of our conversation, your insights come to you very genuinely and in the moment. And it's like you grasp a hold of it and say, okay, let's play, or let's nurture this. However, depending on the type of the book. The book about your mother's Alzheimer, I'm sure you didn't grasp that idea and say, let's play. You grasped that one and said, let's nurture this.
Right. Well, actually, my siblings, who are wonderful, wonderful people, they came to me and they said, nobody has written a book. And it was true. Nobody had written a book at that time about the impact of Alzheimer's on the family. And they said, you're the writer. You need to do this because we need this book. Yes. And we're incredibly generous. And I was able to tell stories in the book about what we did right and what we did wrong. And we did many things wrong because we didn't have anybody to guide us. So it's a book that, and also because I had done a considerable amount of writing for medical stuff. I mean, if you're a professional writer and you need to make a living, you write about all kinds of things. The other thing is you can't do that unless you're a good researcher, unless you like the library, unless you like, and I tell people, Google's okay for a quickie, but get out and go to the library, talk to your librarian, find somebody who knows more than you do.
Yes.
Click. And
I can hear my grandmother was a librarian at the high school and then also at the local libraries as well. And I can hear her going, thank you. Yeah. Thank you, Carrie. Thank you.
It's like if you read any of my books, if there's a street that's mentioned, there is that street in that city. And and it's a one-way street or a two-way street. And I will tell you that. I like the real, and I go out of my way to give you a real building. And I, at a certain point in doing The Inevitable Past, I said to my husband, I said, road trip. I said, I need to go. I need to go to Macon, Georgia. And because I got stalled in the book. And so we went to Macon, Georgia, and I wanted to find my Mrs. Knowles, my namesake, I guess you could call her, grandmother.
Right.
I wanted to find her grave. And I had the library in Macon, Georgia is unbelievable. It has a wing. It has a genealogy wing with 4 full-time staff members who are trained in research like that. And it was like, how did this happen? They were fabulous. I spent 2 days with them. They were fabulous. And at one point, so I learned all about Mrs. Knowles. I learned all this stuff. And then my younger brother, Chuck, he was wonderful. He said, let me help you do some research. So I gave him some money, and I said, there's all these kind of clip files and things, and turned him loose. And I said, you find everything you can. So we did together, we did tons and tons of research. So at a certain point, I said to the librarian, I said, she's buried here. Mrs. Knowles is buried here. And because we found her obituary. And she said, yes. And she said, there's a wonderful historian who knows the graveyards here. And she's with blah, 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 blah. Go meet her, go talk to her. And so she, and now let me just say, I was a third of the way through the book, but didn't know where the book was going because I didn't really have any information. I had what I had, and that was it.
Right.
And so I found this wonderful woman, and she got out all these maps, and she said, okay, it'll be in the older cemetery. And we had the obituary, we had all the dates, we had everything. And she said, I found it. I found her gravesite. She said, but it's very, very odd. She said, it's the largest gravesite in the whole cemetery, but there's only one grave marker there, and that's hers. She says, very weird. And she said, you're going to have to park your car up here, and you have to walk down because you can't really take your car down there. And it's right at the edge of the cemetery. So my husband and I parked our car, and we walked down. And we get there, and there's 3 steps going down to her gravesite. And there's this big clearing, which is this, you could see it was one gigantic plot with one huge tree in the middle and this tiny, grave marker. But there were 3 steps going down to this area, and the 3 steps said Door of Hope.
Oh, I just got chills.
And when we walked down there, she was in the middle, and both of us said, there are dozens and dozens of unmarked graves here of women. And that became that whole issue of these unrecognized, unmarked graves, the lives of these women and how they were basically thrown away. That became the ending of the book. That became, what the granddaughter had to do was to recognize these women. But it was had I not gotten out of my chair, gotten in my car, and done the research that I needed to do, this would be a very different book.
You would never have had that.
No.
Wow.
So it's a lot about research and doing,
it's about getting her out of her head.
Right. And it's about getting out of your chair, down the street. Look around you, see what's there and watch people. It's okay to watch people, and to think, well, why did they do that? Well, what's this? Well, who's that? And that's where characters come from. That's where characters come from. I'll tell one more story. I know we're over time.
Oh, you're fine. Don't worry about.
So there's, by the way, there's really good chapters in the Writing Workbook about editing. It's called My Boot Camp Editing. And if you follow it, you become a great editor of your own work. So many years ago, I kind of hit a wall and I needed to do something. And I wound up, said to my husband, I said, I just need to get out of the house. I need to go do something that I've never done before. And I wound up going to a bankruptcy auction, which was very interesting, of this very, very, very fancy store that was down the street from where we lived. And anyway, I wound up buying a rug, a very tattered, old rug, and for just about nothing. And that became the basis of Ashwin's rug, because I did all this research about, this type of rug. And it was a Turkoman, it was this, it was that. I went to a rug dealer who was an expert on this particular style of rug, and he explained all the symbols that were in the rug, and he told me where the rug came from, and what it was. And it was actually it would have been part of the weaver's dowry. She in it, would have been part of it, would have been a tent door as well as a prayer rug and this and that, and whatever. So Ashwin's rug is 10 related stories about 10 different people who own the same prayer rug, which is Ashwin's rug. So it starts with Ashwin weaving it, and it goes over 100 years of different people who own it, But the trick of the story is that people own it and something happens and it moves to the next person. That was the hard part of the book, was knowing who was going to have it next. I'm a character-driven author. I'm not a plot-driven. I don't work on a plot. I create a character. And then I wake up every day and I say, I wonder what that guy's doing today, or I wonder what that woman is doing today. And so at one point,
I want to tear that apart a little bit. Sure. Because I've not heard anybody explain it that way. I am a plot-driven writer. I am a character-driven writer. Right. And I don't mean to interrupt your story at all, but okay. Real quick.
What's the difference?
Well, it's not so much what's the difference, but what's the benefit of each?
Well, for instance, John Grisham is a plot-driven, okay? So a plot-driven writer, in fact, I sat in on a lecture that he gave about being a plot-driven author, is you come up with an idea and you kind of say, okay, blah, 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 this is going to happen, that's going to happen, and this is where we're going to end up. And so it's, like they have the plot in their mind, and then they have the character, they create a character who can go through the plot and, come out the other end. Whatever. Okay. And a character-driven author builds a character and puts them in a situation, and then allows them to fail and to succeed. And that's how the story moves forward, is, with character-driven. And so the plot becomes secondary. In a character-driven novel, the main character is always, like we are in real life, always moving towards redemption, always trying to be the better self, we hope. Unless
that is the hope.
Exceptions to that, like the exception I always give is, who is the guy who ate people, of the lambs. So, he was not moving to his better self. However, we had to stay with him because we had to know, what is this guy going to do? So a reader would say, what is this guy going to do when they're reading? They may not say, oh, I'm reading a character-driven book, but their response to the book is going to be, I wonder what this guy is going to do next. But a plot-driven, book, the reader is going to say, I wonder what's going to happen next.
Oh, yes. Because I'm sitting here and it's like, what am I? And I am very much the character-driven, because to me, when I'm sitting in, I'm in their, I'm in their head. I feel what they feel. I smell what they smell, and I'm moving right along with the character in the book. But if I'm writing a nonfiction piece, obviously I'm not in a character role, and in that case I have that outline, a loose outline, because I am someone who follows the flow, and it doesn't always follow the outline. But that's interesting.
Yeah, so that's the difference. And so once you understand that, then you can actually have better control over what you're doing.
Yes.
You can be more purposeful. And so, like with The Inevitable Past, I didn't know I didn't know where this book was going ever,
Right.
and that's why I had to go to Macon, Georgia, because I had to figure this out. I didn't know what the next piece was going to be. And so I often talk about it in terms of, the good parent and the bad parent. The bad parent says, my father was a doctor, my grandfather was a doctor, I'm a doctor, you're going to be a doctor.
Mm-hmm.
And the child has the option to be a doctor and hate their parents because they don't want to be a doctor, or rebel and run away, But the good parent, the character-driven author, will say, you are mine, I've created you, and I love you for your faults. And that's the other thing. If you're a character-driven author, the character has to have faults. The character has to have faults. If they don't have faults, they can't get better,
Right.
And so you're trying to move your character to a better state of grace, always. So anyway, I have this rug. And does that make sense to you?
Oh my gosh, you have no idea how many like ding 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 dings just went off in my head, because, and the thing is there are so many people who say you've got to write this way. There's so many like hardened gotta do's, and we all write differently, but yet there's common threads that, just like how we all talk, it's the same thing. But in this, by presenting it this way, what you've done is, and this was a phrase that came to me as you were saying it, is you just took away the shame of not doing it like they said you had to do it.
There's 100 ways to do things right,
Yes.
But if you understand the difference between plot-driven and character-driven, bam, your life becomes much easier as a writer.
Oh
and it's
gosh.
a choice. It's a choice,
It is.
And so make the one that is comfortable for you. For me, it's comfortable to have people who I don't know what they're going to do. So yes. I'm writing Ashwin's rug. And the trick is the rug has to go from hand to hand, has to get to the next person. And it gets to the next person. It can't always be the same way, because then it becomes a boring book,
Right.
Part of the fun is how does the rug get to the next person?
Right.
So through a series of events, the rug winds up, I don't know, chapter 4, chapter 5, the rug winds up with a priest who has lost his faith. And the prayer rug, it's a prayer rug. And the prayer rug, he is trying to bring back his faith by using this prayer rug. And this prayer rug becomes like so important to him. And, he's a Catholic priest, but here he is with a Muslim prayer rug. And but it's like that is his world. Well, he was a fascinating character for many, many reasons for me. He was really fun to work with. But I began to realize after about 3 months into this priest owning this prayer rug that he was not going to share this rug with anyone, that he was not going to give up this rug in goodwill to somebody else who might need it more or whatever.
Because he's dependent on it. He's
dependent on it. And he never quite gets to the point that he has that passion that, he's trying to get back to the passion of his faith. And man, every day I'd come to my office, I'd sit down and I'd say, okay, what are we going to do today? And I'd start working, and maybe I'd get a sentence out of it. Maybe I'd get him to get some tea, and I got him starting drinking, whatever. And so he drank a little bit too much sherry, and he talked about ghosts, which made his caretaker, his housekeeper, very unnerved. Anyway, and this went on and on and on, and he was not giving up this rug. So I woke up one morning after about 5 months of this. Now we're talking about a short piece here. We're not talking about a major 300-page piece. We're talking about one chapter, and this guy is taking 5-6 months of my time, and I still cannot move that rug away. And I have to have him to move the rug because I don't know who the next character is.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. So I have some problems here. So I woke up one morning and I went to my office and I killed him. And that was it.
Stephen King, kill your
dog. He was gone. My problem was solved. I just killed him. And that was unfortunate. But then Mildred thought the rug was creepy and she gave it away. So anyway, so, when you're a character-driven author, you have a lot. It's more, to me, it's more fun. You have many more puzzles to solve. You have many more things to think about. You have many more,
avenues to take them. The best part about writing is learning it and experiencing it as the character experiences the storyline, because if we, the writer, are not surprised by or shocked by, then how can we relay that to the audience?
Exactly.
Because we're going to write that with passion and so
now character driven versus plot driven.
Yes. So in all of our conversation, is there a pearl of wisdom that you would share with another writer that's, I don't want to say struggling, because we all have struggles and they're nameless, or there's too many names to put to them. But if there's what is a bit of advice you would give to a writer who is like literally pen in hand and an inch away from putting it to the paper or tapping on a keyboard? What's that bit of advice?
Well, to always remember that we read because we're voyeurs. We want to see, we want to experience, and that a story, a book, a short story is really a door or a window into another life. And you need to imagine that door, and your job is to open that door. And that's the job you do, is you open that door. So if you go into it thinking, I'm going to open this door so somebody can have this experience, and you keep that as part of your focus, and it's a mirror and a door, then you're going to be okay. It's a door. What you're doing is you're opening a door for somebody, and you're opening them into another world.
Yes.
Okay. And I think that's why science fiction is so popular, because it's so clearly a door. You walk into a different world. And, but all good fiction is a door.
Mm-hmm. Well, and even nonfiction, some of it.
Nonfiction is a door. Lets you reflect and gives you an opportunity to measure your own life against it.
Yes. Yes.
And that's really wonderful.
Yes.
I often use the Great Train Robbery, which was a fabulous book. I always use that book, and I said, I loved that book. I absolutely love that book. And it's about people who rob trains. I have never wanted to rob a train, but I was able to read that book and have the experience, be right in the middle of a train robbery, and have that kind of heart-racing experience of what the train robbery was. And for that reason alone, I loved that book, because it made my heart race. It made me feel like, whoa, that's what robbing a train is. It was so visceral and so real. And that's why people, Moby Dick. Why? Because a third of the book is chasing the whale, but you are with the whale. You're one with the whale. And, that kind of experience of having been able to read a book that took you in a place you've never gone, that's a door that's been open for you. And just, keep that in mind. Your job is to open the door,
Yes.
and take the word writer away from it, except for, I will say, and then I do have to close, I will say that whenever I do a writing group, I treat it like an AA meeting, and I make everybody go around the room, and they have to say, hello, my name is Carrie, and I am
a writer. Yes.
Say that. And so we treat it a little bit like AA, and that's great. And it's kind of like a confession, and it's not a secret anymore. It's not a secret that that's what you want to do, and that's great.
And our words have power. So
words are powerful.
What is your website, real quick, before we end?
Website is the letter C, Jane, C, Jane Work, CJANEWORK.com.
Perfect. Thank you. I am so grateful for this conversation.
Oh, great. Well, invite me back,
Oh, of course. Of course.
Wonderful. Thanks for, having this conversation. I've loved it.
Me too. Thank you. Before we end our time together, I'd love to say thank you for listening to my entertaining and very, very educational conversation with Carrie Knowles. To access her website and learn more about the book she has written, visit pentopaperpress.com/podcast and select the show notes page for this episode. If this episode resonated with you, please share it on social media and with those you feel will be inspired by it. Help us spread the wisdom. You never know who else needs to hear the messages that are weaved into this conversation. To receive future episodes in your inbox, subscribe to the Pen to Paper Press newsletter and follow the Pen to Paper Press podcast on social media. Take care, and until next time, keep your pen to paper and write. Your words have power. Your story matters. Bye for now.